As the war in Ukraine intensifies, so does the refugee crisis. The last count was over 1.5 million desperate Ukrainians fleeing, trying to make their way into Moldova, Romania. Most of them are in Poland now, and so is our reporter Tim Jackson. Tim has been there for the past 10 days, and he joins us now live in Poland. Tim, tell us, where are you in Poland at the moment?
So right now I'm actually in western Poland, the city of Wrocław, near the German border. But for the past number of days, we were on the Ukrainian border and crossed over as well to try and report some of what we were seeing from there. We landed last Tuesday morning, and it's been a bit of a baptism of fire, I have to say, seeing the enormous queues of people, both in cars and on foot, who were trying to leave Ukraine and flee what's been a devastating war, as we all know. And it's only 2 weeks old. So the reporting that we've done has focused on the refugee situation, as you know, and the fact that it's the biggest flow of displaced people since World War II tells a tale about how big this crisis is and the history that's been written in Europe, a very devastating and sorrowful history, it seems, this year.
Tim, what were the refugees telling you about what they had experienced?
So we spoke to people from all sorts of cities around Ukraine, from every corner of it. Some of them were from Kharkiv, which we know has been largely destroyed now. And almost all of them spoke of their pain at saying goodbye to family members. That was the overriding emotion, was one of pain and worry and despair at what might happen to their family members that they had to say goodbye to for various reasons. Some said goodbye because we know that men are being enlisted to fight. Many of them are volunteering anyway. And others said goodbye to grandmothers, grandfathers, and sometimes even children that had to stay for various reasons. And that probably is the hardest thing for a parent, to say goodbye to their child, whether they're young or old, or, as I said, being enlisted to fight. It's a devastating situation, not only from a material point of view, where their homes could very well not be there when they get back or be owned by someone else when they get back, but also the familial ties that are really being stretched and torn asunder by this war. And it's not just the obvious bloodshed that happens, but the hurt as well that ensues, and the worry of not knowing what's around the corner.
Tim, how hard is it to report on something like that? What kind of impact did this have on you?
I suppose I've been in situations in Syria and in the Central African Republic where war was ongoing as well, and that somewhat prepared me for what I had to see. But what I didn't see in Syria and the Central African Republic was the flow of refugees in such enormous numbers, and the fact that so many of them had to queue for hours and hours outside in the freezing cold below zero, and to suffer that indignity and hardship on top of having to flee their homes is something that compounded the situation, and it was new to me as someone trying to report on it and highlight what was happening. So it's a different type of hardship, I would say, than the poverty suffered in parts of Africa and the brutal realities of war in the Middle East. Obviously, this is just as brutal, but given the fact that the weather is so difficult for people who are on foot and even sleeping in cars, it just compounds things.
So
from a humanitarian go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, Tim, what is their situation? So once they finally do get into Poland, what happens then?
When they get to Poland, what we've seen was an overwhelmingly warm reception by Polish people here, who have opened the doors of their homes, apartments, and a lot of community centres and churches have also done everything they can to make sure that these Ukrainian refugees are as comfortable as can be. They're first processed in either train stations or at the border checkpoints if they're in cars or on foot. And then they're brought generally on buses to refugee centres where people will come and volunteer to take them to their towns, or else people will have already arranged to do so. And there's enormous stocks of food and medical supplies and all sorts of essentials that women and children might need that's being provided by Polish people here, truckloads landing from around Poland and beyond. I know in my own country of Ireland, there's truckloads of goods being sent every day over to Ukraine and to some of the refugee centres in Poland to try and make things a little bit easier for them. So the response has been overwhelmingly generous, but that's the process that they have to go through, and they generally get sent to one of the Polish towns, a town anywhere throughout the country, and sometimes they even go further into other countries.
So are any of these supplies actually making it into Ukraine where this, day-long wait is occurring?
Yeah, so on our first day, we happened to meet a convoy of cars, talk to them at the petrol station, the gas station, as you would say, and we agreed to report on what they were doing and followed them into Ukraine. So we crossed the border on our first day, our first night, and they were bringing all sorts of essentials to help with two hospitals, so medical supplies and also goods such as nappies and things that women and children might appreciate, newborns in a maternity hospital. So that was our trip over the border with them. And we saw all sorts of other vans and lorries that were bringing truckloads of goods into the country. It gets more and more difficult as you go further east to bring goods in because the danger is all the more. And there was, even in the west of the country, we were on the western border of Ukraine with Poland. That was becoming an increasingly dangerous place. We had heard that these two hospitals had seen lots of violence in their surroundings, and even some of the train tracks had been bombed that refugees were fleeing on. So a train journey that would usually take 2 hours ended up at times taking 24 hours because trains would have to find other routes out of the country. So the violence is really spreading, obviously, throughout the whole of the country. It's concentrated maybe more so in the east, the south, and around Kiev, but it's certainly spreading west, it seems. But thankfully, people are willing to take the risk of bringing supplies into Ukraine.
Right. So, one question I have, Tim, is, after they sort of just are taken care of in Poland, where are all, these millions of refugees going to go after that? I mean, it doesn't seem like they're going to be going back to Ukraine for a long time.
Yeah, so we've actually managed to start the process of bringing 4 whom we met at the border to Ireland. And thankfully, people even as far away as Ireland have started opening their doors and trying to arrange schooling for the teenagers and a university place as well for one of the people we're helping. So I think a lot of European countries are bending over backwards to try and assimilate these people into society, aware that they might be there for quite some time. As much as they might want to go home, it probably won't be safe for quite some time, unfortunately. Please God, the peace talks might bring about peace and a resolution, but it seems for now as if most of these Ukrainians are preparing to live in countries that aren't home. And those countries largely have been very welcoming. And so there's been an incredibly generous response from Poland, a country which is so often caricatured as being anti-immigrant, but they've opened their doors so generously to over 1.5 million refugees. And the government are now providing a supplement to homes that take in some of the refugees, and will, with this, I think it's 40 zloty, which is only $10 per week, they'll be better able to provide food for some time for those who are staying in the houses. So the Polish government, I think, on this one is definitely to be commended for its very generous response, and as well, though, there's citizens throughout Europe who are responding by opening their homes. So it's good has came out of what's a terrible, terrible, evil situation. But we see that there is a strength as well still in people to respond generously.
That's what I wanted to ask you, Tim. What was your impression of mostly the video that I've seen, and Michael Hogan and I, who you were there with, we've been working on this report, and we hope to post it later today. That you guys worked on for several days. Most of the video I've seen are the mothers with the small children. How do you think the mothers were coping? How are they holding up?
We've seen a lot of tears, especially as people disembarked trains and they realized they were in a safer situation. But as I was saying to Michael at the time, it was very much a bittersweet situation in that they had to say goodbye to everything they knew to be home in the Ukraine, and to all their family that they had to leave behind. So it's obviously a very emotional time for so many who've been forced out, particularly mothers who aren't sure how they're going to continue caring for their children, or in what situation they'll find themselves, which country even that they'll find themselves in a few days and weeks. I'm actually in Western Poland, and the train station right next to me is filled with refugees, and they're people who are trying to make their way west. Most of them won't know exactly where they're going, but there's a lot of women and children, just like you say, and thankfully they're largely very resilient people, it seems. Ukraine obviously has a history of suffering the effects of war in a big way, and is no stranger to the pain that can be inflicted by other nations on it. So it's obviously a young nation as well. I think it only emerged officially after the fall of the Berlin Wall, after the fall of the Soviet Union in '91. And they know that most of their family will have been through various conflicts in the past. So maybe that builds some resiliency, but naturally there's great hurt at what's been sprung upon them.
Well, Tim, I have such a heart for Ukraine myself. My daughters, my wife and I adopted two teenage girls from Odessa in 2007. They're now 30 and 27, and they have three sisters whom they've not been able to communicate with in the past week. Odessa is now in the crosshairs. And it's just, I came to love this country so much. I've also traveled in Russia. I have a Russian son, so I've been to Russia twice. But there was something about Ukraine and the spirit of the Ukrainian people. And Tim, look, we're talking about our Christian brothers and sisters here. I was really impressed how Christian the nation of Ukraine truly is. These are just some lovely people. I will never forget the experiences I had, and I have friends in Odessa right now. Friends who have had to leave Odessa. They're in Romania right now, and this is a family who has a ministry. They're Baptist missionaries, and they take care of special needs orphans. That's what they're all about. And they had to leave those orphans behind. Tim, I don't know. I'm just personally heartbroken by this, as I know all praying Christians truly are. It just seems like it's a runaway freight train at this point. And to think that this beautiful city of Odessa, which is really one of the great best kept secrets sort of beautiful cities in Europe, to think that it could next come under bombardment is just shocking to me. And I know you had to be experiencing some of those emotions as well, just to think, this is unbelievable. It's like, whoever thought that we would be seeing World War II type scenes again in Europe?
Yeah, I think man's propensity for evil is just remarkable. Yeah. And we're seeing it once again in this conflict. The fact that someone 2,000 miles away could launch a war that will kill innocents on the ground in Ukraine, and also kill thousands of his own soldiers as well, and still go to bed at night and somehow sleep. I don't know how these people live with themselves who can launch these wars of regime change because that's really what we're seeing. And it's a very tragic situation. We know there's been conflict there since 2014 in the eastern part, but none of it justifies going in and slaughtering so many innocent people who are collateral damage and treating their soldiers as cannon fodder, because that's really what it is, as far as I can see. And from what I've heard from those leaving as well, the death toll grows and grows, and yet there's little to no remorse on the part of the people who are responsible.
Well, Tim, right. I mean, thank you for mentioning that about the Russian soldiers. My heart aches when I see, these captured soldiers, and they're just talking about how they thought they were going on army drills. They were absolutely lied to about what was happening, and they're so young. My son is 20 years old, Tim, and think about this. Had we not adopted him, back in 2002, he would very likely be a Russian soldier right now. And as you said, just, it doesn't even seem like Putin cares one bit about how many people are dying right now.
And thank God you did adopt him. I've seen some of the footage of soldiers who unfortunately now are dead, and it is such a brutal, brutal way to go. At the end of a barrel, as we all know. We've seen it in various other wars down throughout the years, that life has become so very cheap. And I think too often the seriousness of war and the cost of war is trivialized because we've become so accustomed to it down throughout this century and the last. And unfortunately, it's right on Europe's doorstep again. So it is. It's within Europe. So we're going to hopefully see a resolution, but it will take a lot of humility, I think, at this point on the part of Putin to back down from the road that he's taken. Well,
I haven't seen an ounce of humility in the man yet. Tim, we're just gonna all have to be on our knees every day, imploring our Lord to intervene somehow, some way. But thank you, brother, for the fine work that you have done. I know you've kind of been stuck in Poland the last couple of days, and I'm going to pray for you to get out. But as we go here, Tim, tell us how people watching can help.
So we're asking people to visit lifefunder.com/help Ukraine, where Jason Jones' charity is at present busing hundreds of people out of Ukraine, helping them to make that journey a little bit easier to the border. And they're taking huge risks, the people who are driving those buses, in doing so. And so if you can support them, go to lifefunder.com/help Ukraine.
Okay, and then what about LifeFunder/Ukraine only? Is that still?
We also have another LifeFunder, which, as you say, is lifefunder.com/Ukraine. And that's going through the Ukrainian Catholic National Shrine in Washington, D.C., right, to help people who are on the ground throughout Ukraine. And that's through Caritas.
Excellent. Okay. Well, we'll put both those. Right.
Wherever they like.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. We'll put both those addresses up. Prayers for you getting back to Ireland. Thank you so much, Tim Jackson, and God bless you, brother.
Thank you, Jim. God bless you.